This is the last part of our series, and we're going to be dealing with the short, unhappy life of Lodovico Marin, who gets upstaged in his own episode by one of the great glory hogs of all time. I am, of course, talking about our friend, the Corsican wonder, Napoleon, and the final fall of the Venetian Republic. In 1789, Lodovico Marin is appointed Doge of Venice. All you history buffs out there might recall that in 1789, the groundwork for the French Revolution, way over in France, is being laid. This, of course, is of little interest to Doge Lodovico Marin. It is of little interest to the oligarchs of Venice in general. Venice, for the last 100 years or so, had pursued a steadfast, some might say, suicidally overconfident policy of neutrality no matter what. I believe the Venetian flag was actually altered to say, "We have no opinion whatsoever." It wouldn't surprise me, is the point here. Lodovico Marin, quite unfortunately for all you Lodovico Marin fans out there, is a bit of a cipher inside his own episode. He runs the Venetian Republic more or less competently during his reign, but the policies that he continues with are leading the Republic on a road to ruin. Let's fast forward a couple of years to the actual French Revolution. In 1793, I believe, the French Revolution occurs, and the ruling dynasty goes for an impromptu haircut, and it takes the whole top off via the guillotine. There's actually a wonderful story about the Venetian ambassador in Paris, dealing with an irate mob who come knocking on his door, and they say, "Are you an aristocrat?" And he's like, "No, I'm Venetian." And they're like, "Oh, well, okay then, let's go and kill the aristocrats next door." And he writes this back to Venice. It was horrible, horrible stuff. Now, the reason I take time to talk about revolutionary France a bit is that the condemnation of France, the killing of a monarch, how dare you violate the divine right of kings, was almost unanimous. Every country condemned what the French revolutionaries did to the monarchy. Except, say it with me now, we have no strong opinions one way or another, Venice. Which kind of made nobody happy. The rest of the Europeans were like, "Really, Venice? You're not going to condemn this?" And the French, or the revolutionary French, were like, "Really, Venice? You're not going to support us? You're a republic too." J.J. Norwich has a great phrase, which is, Venice might have been a republic, but she was not democratic, and she was definitely not egalitarian. Both things that, at least in the beginning of the French Revolution, the French militantly were. The French refused to take any sort of steps to protect themselves. Really? They are using galleys that are outdated, even by the standards of the time. A galley, of course, think of a Roman quadrime. It's basically a rowboat. You have X rows of men all pulling a very big oar and a sail. And the Venetian galleys were made specifically to fight in the Adriatic, but they are entirely outmoded methods of fighting. It would be like if we decided to go to war with, Russia's giant tank army using only the trustworthy and dependable Model T. That is Venice's war footing now. There is an active push against the oligarchy bettering the conditions of its populace. They refuse to fund infrastructure. They no longer are required to keep a certain number of galleys and men combat ready. In short, the oligarchy has done what all oligarchies ultimately threaten to do, and the worst of them actually carry out, which is become self-interested to the point of suicide. The Venetian chroniclers say something along the lines of, it was easier for them to imagine the end of their world than any changes to it. So, we're going to fast forward just a little bit again. And it turns out revolutionary France, while hated by the rest of Europe, gets a bit handsy and starts expanding its borders. It recaptures its former colony, or former province, of Milan in North Italy, and suddenly, under this enterprising young man, the Corsican, Napoleon, they are on Venice's doorstep, and they say, hey, Venice, what you doing there? Not much. Being neutral and not being scared of anyone. That's really interesting, Napoleon says, because it kind of sounds like bullshit to me. You let Austria, who I very much want to punch in the nose, use your roads for free and your shipping lanes, and you don't tax them. That doesn't look neutral to me. And Venice, very eager to placate things, says, oh, no, you misunderstand. Big misunderstanding. Of course, you can maybe pass troops through Venice on the way to Austria. And at this point, anyone who knows how troops far from home tend to act is seeing the conflict coming. Because Napoleon's troops do not behave themselves when they walk through Venice on the way to punch Austria in the nose. They do the standard things that soldiers do, and were, up until very recently, part of the advertisement to be a soldier. Come, see the world, kill foreign people, do horrible things, and not get prosecuted for it. The French soldiers start taking liberties in the Venetian countryside, and so the Venetians, the Veronans, the Paduans, the farmers start waging guerrilla war on the French. You know, you catch them on the road, you shoot them. You catch them sleeping, you cut their throats, that sort of thing. Which is great for Napoleon because it gives him chance to play the card of the defensive attack politically. Why are you harassing my poor men who have never done anything wrong to anyone? Napoleon offers Venice a deal that if they just, swear allegiance to him, he will, out of his great and sincere love of history, not reduce them to vassal status. Venice refuses, saying, no, when we say we are neutral for life. This was particularly badly phrased because as this letter is sent to Napoleon, the Venetian city of Verona decides to rebel against French occupation in a very unsubtle way. So now Venice is between a rock and a hard place. They have to condemn their own city and hope that they get to keep neutral status, or they can try and fight a professional, state-organized army that is already in their territory. Well, this doesn't go well. Napoleon brings his full force to bear against Verona and takes the Republic by force. He even, and this is a nice little callback to the Antinori episode, manages to get through all the buffer of the terra firma and marches on the lagoon with artillery. Of course, the oligarchs and the people of Venice proper promptly panic and flee. Only Doge Lodovico Marin, who again, cipher in his own story, sort of keeps a sort of Zen-like calm as the end of the Republic falls. The records that I have access to talk about his final words as he takes off the ducal corno, or horn, sort of a sleeping cap, little horn at the end. the symbol of the office of the Doge. They used the corno, by the way, because the original ducal crown was so blinged out with jewels and gold and diamonds and all the fancy, gaudy things you can think of that it was impossible to wear for a human being. It would crush you. So they settled on this fancy nightcap instead. Well, anyway, he unfastens it as Napoleon rides into Venice and hands the ducal corno to his assistant and says in Venetian, "Take this, I shall not be needing it." And that, in a very broad sense, is the end of the Venetian Republic.
Where is she now? How does she feel?
She's looking out the window and is like, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen." And I'm like, "Shut the fuck up, cat."